Welcome back to Dead Good Book Reviews. I'm Judith and you're watching another episode of Overbooked here on the channel. This is the series where I talk about every single book on my shelves because humans are weird sometimes, aren't they? Today we are talking about Martha Wells' Murderbot series. You may note that I'm holding up but one of the books in this series. This is the only book that I actually own. It is Network Effect, the Murderbot novel. This is full length. The rest are novellas and I do not personally own copies of them. I have borrowed them. I have had review copies of some of the more recent ones. I have listened to the audiobooks on Scribd. Not sponsored by anyone. Regardless of where books come from, all opinions are my own and nobody's paying me to talk about books except for my patrons. I'm going to keep this as spoiler-free as humanly possible for the series, so we're going to have to talk about the overall trajectory, but I'm not going to put in any major spoilers. However, if you do want to go into these books knowing absolutely nothing, pause the video, come back when you've read them, we'll talk then. And I will link the story graph for the series down below in case you want to check out any user-generated content warnings. This is an adult sci-fi series that has been coming out since 2017 and it is still being produced to this day. The book that we're closest to in terms of release dates is System Collapse, which I have read for this video but won't be coming out until November of 2023. Martha Wells is a very well-known speculative fiction author. Alongside writing Murderbot, she's written a whole bunch of other things. Her most recent book is called Witch King and I need to get to reading it. To kick us off, to get us in the spirit, to give you an indication in case you haven't heard anything about what Murderbot is, let me read you the blurb of the first book, All Systems Red. In a corporate-dominated spacefaring future, planetary missions must be approved and supplied by the company. That's a capital C company. Exploratory teams are accompanied by company-supplied security androids for their own safety. But in a society where contracts are awarded to the lowest bidder, safety isn't a primary concern. On a distant planet, a team of scientists are conducting surface tests, shadowed by their company-supplied droid, a self-aware sec unit that has hacked its own governor module and refers to itself, though never out loud, as Murderbot. Scornful of humans, all it really wants is to be left alone long enough to figure out who it is. But when a neighbouring mission goes dark, it's up to the scientists and their Murderbot to get to the truth. So there are 7 Murderbot books and 1 Murderbot short story. I'm just going to talk through them now, reading off my laptop, putting the covers up. Bear with me. All Systems Red, Artificial Condition, Rogue Protocol, Exit Strategy, Network Effect, which is the novel, Fugitive Telemetry, Home, Habitat, Range, Niche, Territory, which is the short story, and System Collapse, which is the one coming out later in the year. Just so you've got all of those fun words swirling around your head. I think the biggest selling point of this series as a whole is Murderbot, our main character, the sec unit gone rogue, who hasn't gone rogue in a murdery way, but has gone rogue in a please leave me alone, I just want to watch media kind of way. Murderbot is snarky. Murderbot is sarcastic. For most of the series, Murderbot is having to pretend to be none of those things. It is so good, and it is one of those wonderful sci-fi books where on the surface you are seeing snarky robots, and when you think about it much harder and when you get into the books and when you read more of it, it is so much more about what is sentience, what is humanity, what is being a person in this day and age, what does the future look like, and why capitalism is terrible. Murderbot encompasses all of those questions. So good. And not in a way that feels preachy, never in a way that feels like it's being told to you, just in a way that you get to discover yourself. Partly because Murderbot is also figuring out all of those things. So yes, deep philosophical thoughts and also the extremely relatable, why are all these humans being terrible? I just want to sit down and watch a soap opera. What more do we want? I think within that, because the books are in Murderbot's perspective, I think with the exception of Home, Habitat, Niche, Territory, which is a slightly different perspective, but because we're getting Murderbot's idea of things, the actual writing style is very interesting. Now, I will say for this reread, I did the bulk of these by audiobook. Everything except the short story and System Collapse I did by audio, and then I did those 2 digitally. One of the things I found very interesting going back to reading actual text for System Collapse was that I hadn't picked up as much on the writing style in audio form, because there's a lot of things where Murderbot will list things out, so you can see the almost computer-like elements of Murderbot's way of talking much more in the physical form. So bear that in mind if you're planning on picking these up. You might have a different experience based on which format you choose. But it's a very interesting way of getting into the character's head by getting into the writing style. I think that the side characters in this story are very cool. There are some recurring characters, despite the fact that these are for the most part, self-contained adventures. I'll talk about the vague structure in just a second, but the side characters that we see repeatedly are also very enjoyable. Seeing those side characters through Murderbot's eyes, putting your own spin on it, trying to work out what the characters are doing because you as a human are experiencing them differently, but you're only through Murderbot's perspective. Very interesting. The other robots that we meet, I thought that was a really fun addition to the way that the books are exploring sentience and I guess autonomy a little bit as well. So we do have these distinct stories. It is one of those series where the adventures are on their own, but the arc really applies to the whole thing. And I think that's particularly true of the later books in the series. It's feeling a lot more continuous than the first few books did. So rather than seeing one plot where you see the world change and develop, it's lots of different plots where you see character growth and change to attitudes over a longer period of time, over multiple books. And this has been since 2017, so it's been a little bit of a while, but reading them back to back, you definitely get that more of that sense of an overall arc than I did when I was reading them more spaced out. And I do think the plots are very cool. I'll come on to some of my problem with the plotting of these in just a moment, but I do think that the overall adventures are very fun. I think my favourite overall is Fugitive Telemetry, which is the book that is most similar to a murder mystery, which is quite telling that that would be the one I enjoy. But there's lots of different adventures that Murderbot finds itself in. We have more of a get in and get out kind of story. There's more heisty elements to some. There's I'm trying to think what other examples of things there are without spoiling elements of the book. There's more combat focused ones. There's a lot of variety, and I think the continual themes around character carry through all of them, but the actual plots are distinct in a way. Let's talk more about it. Because I do feel, especially because I read these back to back, I read one a week for, well, presumably 7 weeks-ish, and they do blend together quite a bit in my mind. It doesn't help that I don't find the covers particularly distinctive. I think they're beautiful, but I don't find that the cover applies to the book enough that I could see the cover and remember which book I was talking about. And if you asked me to explain the individual plot of each book, I could only do that with Fugitive Telemetry because it's my favourite. All the others, a little bit mushed together, a little bit confusing, including moving from a novella to a novel, which is a bit wild. I don't actually think that's a downside to the series as a whole because you can read them all in one go because they're novellas, but it definitely is something worth noting. I do find they kind of mush together quite a bit. You might feel differently, your reading experience may vary, that was how it felt for me. I think, again, another pro, con, a bit mushy. I think you know very quickly if you aren't going to like these books. The tone is very specific, Murderbot's voice is very specific. You'll find out if you don't like them very quickly. If you don't like book one, don't carry on with the rest of them. If you're not used to the kind of pacing of novellas, I would suggest reading a few of them together because novella pacing is very specific. I've read a bunch more of them now than when I first read these, and I remember when I first read them having a kind of sense of what's next, where was the rest of it, what's going on, whereas now I can appreciate the pacing of a novella much more. And also I can read 7 of them, so it feels much more like a longer series, even though the books themselves are quite short. Other things you might want to read if you've read Murderbot and enjoyed it, or vice versa. Becky Chambers' A Closed and Common Orbit is a classic of the what is a person kind of robot alien genre. It's so good, it makes me cry every single time. Highly recommend that and that whole series. Another book about an AI and space, but much more of a romance, is Red Scholar's Wake by Aliette de Bodard. I have a review video up for that if you want to check that out. Think about lesbian AI space pirates. And also a book that I really do need to do a reread of, but I mention quite often, Ancillary Justice. It exists. I need to reread it to tell you if I definitely recommend it or not, but I know some people really love this series. Ding! Should you read Murderbot? My answer is yes. I think it's a really great series. It's a good for getting into novellas if you haven't read them before. It's enjoyable, the audiobooks exist, and they are very well narrated. I have a great time with it every time I read it, and personally, I've come to the conclusion that I don't mind that I can't remember all the specifics of every single book. I had a good reading experience overall, and for me that's what matters. What are your thoughts? Have you read these? Do you plan to? Let me know down in the comments below. Especially let me know if you've read Martha Wells' latest book, Witch King. I would love to hear what that's like. While you're down there commenting, if you haven't already, please do subscribe. It makes me feel loved and appreciated. You can also come hang out on Discord where we have chill chats about books. I would like to say an enormous thank you to all the ghosts who haunt me over on Patreon. They support the channel and in return get early access to videos, bonus content, live streams, and more. If you'd like to join their number, that's linked below as well. Thank you so much to you for watching. That's all from me, and I will see you in the next one.
There's gonna be some bloopers now.
You may note that I am only holding up one of the books in this many book series with a number of books.